Okay, and recording has started. By remaining in the meeting, you are consenting to being recorded. And let's get going. Nicole, why don't you kick us off?
Awesome. Welcome, folks. Glad you can join us today. As you can see, we have people continuing to come in. Friendly reminder to mute yourself as you're joining. We will help with that. We are also removing AI note takers from the room in case that pops in with us. Today, we're going to talk about measurable skill gain and credential attainment. This is an operational training hosted by myself, Nicole Hansen, and the esteemed Russ Gearlock over here at Grants Management Office at the Employment Security Department. We've been asked to offer this guidance and some technical assistance on this topic by the State Workforce Board. We are so glad that we have so far 117 people in the room today. Thanks for joining us for this conversation this morning. As Ross mentioned, not only is this presentation being recorded, we will certainly send out the slides to folks that were in attendance today, and this will be posted on the Workforce Professional Center. So we now have a page up there that we're offering technical assistance as related to WIOA that our team offers as guidance. So we will make sure that folks have that link to access this afterwards as well. As we go through this training is really broken into three-ish sections. And so my job in the room today is to make sure that questions get tracked and answered. We'll aggregate these questions as well afterwards. So we'll include that with an FAQ doc that we post. We're going to hold questions until the end of the presentation. I promise we'll make time to attend to the questions. So feel free to put them in the chat. I'll be keeping track of them as we go. We'll also pause at the end of each section to accumulate any questions that might be specific to a given section so that we give folks a minute to process through that. As I mentioned, Ross Gearlock is leading us today. I'm going to kick it over to Ross. And also, if you're having any technical issues with attending this technical assistance session today, put that in the chat too, and I'll do my best to support you as we go through. Thanks for joining. Take it away, Ross.
Thank you, Nicole. And one quick request before we get going to conserve some bandwidth because we do have 128 people and counting. If everybody could just shut off their cameras, it will hopefully make this a little bit more clear. So let's get started. We get a lot of questions about what measurable skills gains and credential attainment are and how they relate to each other. And to explain it, we've come up with what we think is a good metaphor, the journey of training. They're often seen as being separate items, but really the two are deeply interconnected. Think of it like being on a road trip. On a road trip, you have a destination and the stops along the way. The credential attainment is the goal itself, the place where all your stops along the way are leading to. Meanwhile, the measurable skills gains are those stops, places where you can resupply, check to make sure you're still on the best road, and note your progress toward your goal. Taken this way, you can see how both measures are vital parts of telling the story of how a customer's progress toward their goal. And I'll just take this minute to reiterate Nicole's request that if you have any questions that you're walking into this with, please do put them in the chat. We will handle all the questions as one. So let's talk about credential attainment. There are two different types of acceptable credential for the measure: a recognized post-secondary credential and a secondary school diploma or recognized equivalent. We have here a graphic with a list of all the acceptable credentials allowed by federal guidance. As this hopefully makes clear, there's a lot of results that could make somebody eligible for this measure. For the adult and dislocated worker program, who gets brought along on the road trip is pretty straightforward. It's basically anyone in the adult or DW program who are in a training program that gets reported to the U.S. Department of Labor. For the youth program, it can be a bit more complicated. All in-school youth are included, but out-of-school youth are only included if they participate in one of the training programs listed in here. Some of them are very common and shared with the adult and DW program. Some of them are unique to youth itself. So if you are working with youth, it's very important that you take steps to gain the awareness of those. So now that we've established who's coming along, let's talk a bit about how we count who makes it to the destination with us. The first group of people is easy. People who have satisfied the requirement for credential attainment when they finish their training and who have had that completion recorded in the case management system. That last part is incredibly important. There are some other ways for people to be picked up and reported for credential attainment, but relying on those is putting your success in somebody else's hands. And that's not a good thing to do when you can just put them in yourself and know that they'll be there. But this, of course, also raises the question, what about people who don't complete? Well, customers are considered to be still in progress until 1 year after they've exited from participation. That means if they've exited and haven't made it to the destination after 1 year, their markdown is never going to arrive. And that this happens is unfortunate and unavoidable. It's also another reason why it's incredibly important that you stay in contact and record everybody who does complete. Acceptable documentation for credential attainment is a bit more expansive than many people realize. It's, of course, the items that people automatically think of, like a copy of the credential, but it can also involve school records, data match with some of our databases, or data that comes from the college system itself. There is one more wrinkle. For a secondary school diploma or equivalent to count, a participant would also need to be either employed or in a training program, and you would need to make sure that those are recorded as you normally would record them. And we'll pause here just to give people an opportunity to put in any questions about this section or to raise anything that verbally if you don't have the ability to use the chat.
Susan?
So if somebody that is a youth, well, 18 years old, but she is enrolled in WIO adult, not youth program, and she's going through finishing up her high school years, can we take a MSG for that? She's not a youth, she's not in the youth program. She's in a regular WIO adult program. And she's going through the high school program. Currently she's in 10th grade, and so every time she move a grade, is that how we measure MSG?
So we'll actually be getting to measurable skills gains in the next section. But it's a really good question. And Nicole, can you record that one down and we'll come back to it?
Yes. Thanks, Susan.
Perfect. Any other questions?
A question in the chat right now from Jeremy. What does the follow-up survey require, or is that up to the local workforce board?
Can you say a little more about
on your previous slide, you had some examples of things that you can use, and one of them was follow-up surveys. But I wanted to know, like, what is required for that follow-up survey to count to be used as documentation for a measurable skills gain. But if you're going to get to that later, we can just hold the question.
Yeah, let's mark it down, and we'll come back to it.
Duly noted. We also have a question from Linda for adult and DW. The customer obtains credential after exit from the program but does not qualify for follow-up, so no employed exit. Can we still capture the obtained credential during the year following the exit?
Yes. The answer is yes to that.
Thanks, Liz Gallagher.
Thank you, Liz, and yes.
We also have a question from Seth. In your slide showcase note as an acceptable form of documentation for successful completion, Can you provide an example case note to document completion of a credential attainment?
Unfortunately, we can't provide that level of detail because the specific requirements of what's needed in a case note vary from area to area. And so we could give something, but it wouldn't necessarily fulfill the needs of your local area. And so for anything with that level of specificity, we would suggest that we would recommend that you check in with your local program manager, and they'll be able to provide you with some guidance on that. Okay, so then let's talk about the steps along the way, the measurable skills gains. So measurable skills gains are a required element, but they're also a useful tool for case management. Since you know what your ultimate goal is, the measurable skills gains can help you to structure your case management and to reinforce expectations. If they have midterms, you know you're going to be able to get measurable skills gains at midterms. You know when the skill tests will happen. By working with the customer to develop a plan in advance, you make sure that they know that you will be contacting them and know approximately when that will be. It's easy to explain, and it helps develop good habits. Think of it like looking in advance to find gas stations and rest areas for your road trip. You can then make sure everyone in the car knows what to expect. So there's a lot of text here, and this offers all the things that can demonstrate a measurable skill gain. We'll give you just a second to take a look at this. So there's a lot more variety here in what can be used, but the standards for documentation are a bit more stringent than for credential attainment. Unlike with credential attainment, a measurable skills gain must include documentation collected and uploaded to file that reflects a specific skill that was gained. So like the last slide, we'll give you just a minute to look this one over and then the next one, since they're halves of a single whole. And these slides will, like I said, be available on the Workforce Professional Center along with the video of this talk if you want to review in greater depth later. The most important thing to keep in mind about this list is that the documentation needs to demonstrate that a particular skill was gained, not just that a student continued to progress. So a progress report that just says that the student is still enrolled wouldn't suffice, but a progress report that says that, say, they successfully learned how to back up a truck would. Assuming they're a CDL program, there's no credit for nurses who learn how to back up 18-wheelers, I'm afraid. So now let's talk a bit about why they're important. And the simple answer to this is because the results of their being counted have a direct impact on your life and the lives of your coworkers and the participants. By and large, the results of how we as a state and as local areas perform on measurable skills gains and credential attainment are based on data that's entered into the system by case managers and line staff. Each quarter, reports are submitted to the U.S. Department of Labor, who then use the data to adjust our targets. This, in turn, adjusts the number of people that you would need to take on the trip. The Department of Labor then uses a statistical adjustment model on the results. The idea is that the more barriers a participant has, the more time and resources are expected to be required to help them. The targets are then adjusted depending on the results. To further stress the metaphor, it's as if you get more credit for taking people on the trip who would otherwise have had a more difficult time getting to the destination. And if you don't enter all the barriers a customer faces, the Department of Labor won't know to give you credit for them. Listed here are the factors that impact the statistical adjustment model. You can see that there's a lot of them, but unemployment rates, type of layoff, and literacy rates all have a particularly big impact. But everything on this slide matters because tracking it properly makes it clear that the customers you're serving have barriers that should be taken into account. The attainment actuals are the raw percentage. The negotiated goal is what was worked out with the Department of Labor. And this is where the statistical adjustment model comes in. The number goes up or down depending on how many barriers the customers have. As you can see, the actuals are the raw number, the total who successfully completed divided by the total number who made the attempt. I'm not a huge fan of math myself, but that's basically what this is. It's a division problem. To get the ultimate result, you would compare that result with the negotiated Department of Labor target. So the state workforce board works with the Department of Labor to figure out what our target is going to be. And the goal is that the percentage that we achieve exceeds that target. And if you've ever looked at our measurable skills gains and credential attainment scores on the state workforce board's website, you've seen that they reflect a percentage, and that's the degree to which we reached or exceeded the negotiated target. There are, however, some ways that customers are removed from consideration and not counted against the results. These are exit exclusions. Broadly speaking, they represent circumstances where the customer can't complete the program due to circumstances beyond your or their control. It's very important that this is tracked in the case management system because otherwise the failure to do so will be reflected in the results. The number that we receive from the U.S. Department of Labor, and which is then negotiated with the local areas, is impacted directly by these. Just to reiterate, the more difficult the cases we take on, the more they expect that the fewer people they expect that we will be able to serve and get into measurable skills gains and credential attainment. This is why it's incredibly important that all of a person's barriers are entered into the system, and that if there are circumstances that come up that would cause these sorts of exclusions, that they're recorded as well. So let's talk a little bit about what's at risk, because this is not without consequences. The impacts of our failure to meet the targets ramp up, and they can become quite substantive. It starts with a corrective action plan, which is a negotiated plan where the state and the U.S. Department of Labor figure out how they're going to fix the problem. If the terms of the plan aren't met in the second year, we would then see a 5% cut to the governor's discretionary fund. And these funds have historically been used for programs like Federal EXA and Career Connect Washington. So there's a direct impact on our customers, and we would continue to lose those funds each year until performance improves. So this would have a direct impact on our ability as a state and as local areas to serve customers. There are also locally negotiated targets with impacts for failures to reach those. And as with state targets, the first year is a corrective action plan. If the terms of the plan aren't met in the second year, the plan continues and is updated. But if the lack of improvement is pronounced enough, the state workforce board may recommend against recertifying the local workforce board to the governor. In the third year of failure, the governor is required to intervene, and this could consist of replacing the local board, forbidding the use of particular providers, or anything else the governor deems appropriate. So it's incredibly important that these measures are met and recorded properly. And that is something that is everybody's responsibility, not from us at ESD all the way down to case managers. To assist with your work in this, we've included some links in this slide deck to help you further. And like I said, this is going to be on the Workforce Professional Center website, which is wpc.wa.gov, along with many other resources. All right, so then let's get to some questions.
Thanks, Ross. While we're working on questions, I'll make sure to include the link to the WPC site so that folks have the page in question right away before we leave the room today. We did have the holdover question that Susan offered about MSGs at the top of the hour. Susan, I'm inviting you to reframe it. I understand that we're talking about an adult participant and high school diploma.
Yeah, so we have job seeker that, well, in particular, this one is 18. She came to US with a 10th grade. She attended, I think currently she's in high school, 10th grade, 10th grader, and I was just wondering, because you mentioned earlier that only if the individual is in the youth program, then we can record the MSG for her, but she's not enrolled in youth, she's in real adults. So is that something that we can capture or no?
Would you like me to speak to this?
Jump in, Liz.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Right ahead.
so the requirement for an MSG always depends on the services that you have entered, unless it's an in-school youth. If someone is enrolled as an in-school youth, they're in the measurable skills gains denominator every single program year that they are enrolled. Now, in the example you're talking about, and let me know if I'm getting this wrong, is if someone is enrolled in high school, but you only have them enrolled in the adult program. Is that right?
Yes.
So in that case, you would have to have a service triggering the requirement for an MSG. And I'm not sure if there is a touch point in ETO or if there will be a service in WAWorks that would trigger, if there is one that is enrolled in secondary school, if you have that service entered, then you would be on the hook for a measurable skills gain each program year and a credential before that 365 days after their exit from active services. Does that make sense?
So what you're saying, look into ITSS, which is individual training support service or something like that, for this secondary, because like you said, we have to go and trigger something so that
Mhm.
an MSG will be required to measure this. And because we have 365 days, then
Well, and
but
that's
at this point you
for
don't know.
So for the measurable skills gain, that's live. Always remember that you have to enter that in between July 1st of the program year and June 30th of the program year for each program year that they are actively enrolled in services. Now, the credential attainment, you have 365 days after the day of their official exit to enter that credential attainment. But for the measurable skills gains, you have to enter it in live. It's really important that you do that because depending on how long they're enrolled, you might not see the credit for that until it's too late. So it's really important to enter it in live if you can within 10 days after the end of each quarter, but certainly before the end of the program year if you can't get it in every quarter. And so Ross might know if it's even possible to have a service currently in ETO for an adult to be enrolled in secondary school. It's possible that that is not a service for an adult. And if that's the case, I don't know that you could get credit for a measurable skills gain for someone in that specific scenario. Ross, can you speak to if an adult can have an enrolled in secondary school service, as you know, ETO right now?
I don't think so, but I'm not 100% on that. So let me look into it. There is that service, Lisa. I'm not sure if it triggers. So let us look into that and nail it down, and we can also try and find out how it's going to be in the new system as well.
And I know all of the definitions for these, what counts. It can be really confusing and squishy. And so if you are ever unsure and this training is not answer your question for a really specific, complicated scenario, I put my email in the chat. And at the risk of blowing up my inbox, I'm here for you guys. You guys are always welcome to email me if you have a specific question. And I'm very happy to answer this because it is squishy. It's not always in the guidance, although Teagle 1016 change 3 is probably your best documented resource from DOL on performance outcomes at this time until they come out with something new. But I've been staring at this stuff for 10 years. So if you're not sure or if you're not able to find the guidance, reach out to me and I will help you.
Definitely talk to your local
Workforce
supervisors.
Development Board?
Yeah.
Okay.
To check in, because localities have different rules and different, so definitely keep them in loop as well.
What's the WTB stand for again, please?
It's for the
Workforce.
state workforce board.
Oh,
Yeah, the Workforce
okay.
Training Board.
Yeah.
Workforce Training
It's a
Board.
long
Okay.
name.
Yeah.
There's a quick follow-up question on this question, as we're kind of talking through a little bit of a case study here. Is co-enrollment an option for this adult in this scenario?
It's a possibility. It would require being eligible for both programs, though, and so they would have to be eligible for both the youth and the adult programs. If they were, then it's possible. But we can't really answer that in the hypothetical beyond that, I'm afraid.
All right, we did have some other questions in the chat and Liz did handle them largely, but just for the sake of the group, there was a question about why credential attainment for secondary completion only counts if they're employed or enrolled in post-secondary. On paper, high school completion or equivalent would appear to be a credential attainment. Liz offered in the chat that it's a rule in statute section 116 of the law, of WIOA law, and embodies the spirit of WIOA, which is that an educational credential is not enough. The credentials they earn should lead to employment and earnings, and we're none of us sure why they don't require the same for adult and DW, but it is true for youth. Anything else you want to tack on that, Liz, before we move to next question?
Nope, that covers it, unless there's more clarification needed.
Interesting. We also had a question about they're required to have at least one MSG per program year while the client is still in training or has not completed. Is that correct? Liz offered correct for every year that the client is enrolled as an in-school youth or every year that a client is enrolled in an MSG triggering service. This annual MSG requirement, when triggered by in-school youth or the MSG triggering service, is by program year. So you have to enter it prior to June 30th each program year. You did mention that as well. There was a question about the definition of knowledge-based exam.
Actually, Nicole, before we move on, I did want to just underscore something. You have to have at least one a year, but it really is best to have as many as is called for by the training, because they really are an invaluable way to create the context to have a check-in with the client or the customer, to be able to tell them, I'm going to be checking in with you at the following times so that we can discuss the following things, so they're aware of it, they can be a little more ready for it, so they know you're going to be in touch with them, so that they understand that it's going to be a relationship. You're not just cutting them a check and hoping for the best. You're there to assist them, and that that you make sure they get in. Because if you're focusing on one and something goes wrong and you don't get the one in there, you have none. But if you're doing them regularly, if one of them doesn't get in, you're still covered.
Well said.
Thanks, Rose. There's a question about the definition of knowledge-based exam, or what is an example of an exam that is not knowledge-based? Liz reminded us that the formal guidance around this is in TEAGL 1016, change 3, specifically on page 20. Examples include the passage of a component exam in a registered apprenticeship program, an employer-required knowledge-based exam, or an industry or occupational competency-based exam. I did see that someone did drop the link to the TEAGL 1016. Thanks, Joseph, here in the chat. This is also on our resource slide. Maybe, Ross, it might be helpful if we click up to the slide just above this one so that folks can see these quick links to everything that we provided here. That's our, as you can see, top and foremost resource for this conversation. So there'll be a quick link there as well. We are getting some more questions in chat here. We're still catching up on ones asked previously. How are we tracking these barriers so they are recorded and our numbers assessed? This person has not been yet mentioned they needed to record those. I'm assuming with the barriers that we're talking about, this question came in during the sanctions conversation. Do we want to add some clarification around which barriers are being tracked?
Yeah, we actually have them listed in the slides. Sorry, I'm flipping back, everybody. But so these are the specific barriers that come into consideration for the statistical adjustment model. And in the current case management system, which will be a concern for the next 6 weeks, they're recorded in various places in the touch points you use. And it's one of the things that makes it difficult to track them is the fact that it's kind of scattershot. The new system is much more streamlined in terms of what it asks for, when it asks for it, and making sure that the proper information gets put in with the proper documentation. So as it currently stands, there's specific documentation as to the data element validation in ETO, and you will gain more. There will be training in the WildWorks training. It goes over what you need to do in order to make sure that these get into the system. And there's going to be additional training provided that we're working on right now that will hopefully give you some practice so that you can work on making sure that all of this gets in there.
Okay, question. Would MSG still be applicable when a WIWA DDub or adult training participant doesn't complete the course but does get employment?
Yes, they are related, but they're two different things. So it's really important that you put in the measurable skills gains even if they don't complete, because you'll still get credit for them. And it's always possible that they'll come back. They'll decide to finish, because like I said, there are other ways by which the credentials are tracked depending on the school that they go to. So basically, the best advice we can give is do everything you can to record everything you know, and then that's all you can do.
That's concise. We could have done the whole training in just one sentence if we did it that way. Record everything you can about everything you know. It's all you can do. Okay, if OSD is paid by other, can we still capture that MSG? Other than WIWA, I'm assuming.
Yeah, if it's in a program that is paid for by one of the programs that reports. So there's a slide back toward the beginning that discusses the programs that report for the federal measures, and that's WIOA, that's the NDWGs, that's I think the veterans programs, JVSG, and some other ones. And so if somebody's in training paid by one of those, my inclination would be to say it's not a bad idea to make sure that it gets in there. Liz, what are your thoughts?
That has always been a question for me too. I think when I worked in Tennessee and Texas, when we put in occupational training that was non-WIOA funded, I believe it still went into the denominator in that case. But I think that is something that we would need to ask about ETO and WAWWorks specifically. Let me do some research on that and see if I can find you an answer, because that one I am unsure of if it officially says in law, rule, and guidance that non-WIOA funded occupational trainings trigger the denominator for either MSG or CAR. That's a really good question.
And while we're at that, I'll also call back to a question we got earlier that was a really good question about this participant survey that was mentioned on a previous slide. So the language in that came straight from one of the Teagles, and I have to say I'm 85% sure I know what that is, but 85% isn't enough. So let us do a bit of research so that we can get it locked down and get 100%, and we'll be able to answer that for you.
Thanks, Ross. Susan, I saw your hand up. Was that a question related to one of the things we're discussing?
Yeah, because I just want to give a little bit of context. Like, for example, somebody won a CDL and they got funding from another organization like ANU. And so when we put it in there in the ITSS, we just put pay by other. We select, one of the service instead of OST because we're not funded. That's why that's the question. Should we also, measure at MSG for this particular job seeker? Mhm.
If you're not sure, it's always safe to enter the MSG or credential anyway. I'm going to do some research right now and see if I can't get you guys an answer before this is over.
Okay, and we select pay by other instead of OST, you know what I mean? So I don't know, is that correctly also? So thank you.
Thanks, Susan. It looks like there's about as many ways to approach this as there are local areas in the state. That's pretty standard practice here. So thanks, Liz, for doing some homework on this. Hopefully we'll get that to you before we close today. And if not, we'll be confident to include that perhaps in bold lettering on our follow-up FAQ. We have 3 more questions at present here. The question is there any way to add retirement to the exemptions list?
Unfortunately, there's not. It's established by the DOL. Basically, they decide what exemptions are, and we kind of just follow along with them. It would be very good if it were, but unfortunately, I don't think it's possible.
Yeah, I think in that case, you just have to be really intentional about who you are enrolling in your program and make sure you're talking to them really thoroughly about what their plans are. And if they are planning to retire within a year, you either need to enroll them and help them knowing that they're going to be a 0 in the numerator for employment in EQ2 and Q4, or you might get them into a different program if you don't want them to hit the numerator or the denominator to get what they need. But yeah, that's a question of, I think, planning for whether or not you want them to hit your denominator incorrectly, because Ross is right. Unfortunately, DOL is the only one that determines what an exclusion can be, and the exclusion has to happen before they go into follow-up as well. That's another caveat to exclusions.
And it's also about what's best for them, because if they have a sense that they're going to be aiming toward retirement or close to retirement or want to retire, there's still things that you can do for them and with them to prepare them for that. And so by working through it and saying, okay, so what's this going to look like? and maybe you're still the person who works with them. Maybe you get them referred to a different place. But while you're working with them, maybe that particular training isn't the best option for them. Or maybe there's something different. It's not necessarily just it's not a matter of just you're going to retire so I can help you. It's a matter of helping the person sitting across from you to build the future that they want to get to with the best tools that you have available. And there's a lot of ways to do that that will make sure that ultimately the record reflects the great work that you do.
Thank you. So before we move to our next question, just seeing some confirmation from Brooke, our beloved monitor in the chat here, training paid by other does not report on the Pearl and does not count. Just that.
Thank you, Brooke. I just got to say before we go any further, I'm incredibly happy to have both Liz and Brooke here.
It takes a village.
Both of your knowledges are absolutely invaluable.
Questions. Okay, there's 2 questions about the new system. So I'm going to ask the final question that's not new system related. What is the final date that ESD pulls data for the annual Pearl reporting? Brooke offers it as September 15th. She must have that stenciled into her calendar in bold.
I just wanted to clarify it's September 15th that you have to have all of your data or data corrections in order for it to be captured and sent on our annual certification. I work really closely with them because I do all the data validation, but yeah, we always tell people if you have any corrections or entries that need to be entered, get them in no later than September 15th to have them count for the year.
I can never keep straight if it's the 10th or the 15th, because the 10th was the date that I always told people when I was managing case managers. I said get it in by the 10th, and now it's stuck in my brain. So I am again happy you kicked in with that, Brooke, because I was back and forth.
All right, questions about the new system. Will the new system have a report that providers can run for MSG?
Yes.
Yeah, they better.
Yeah. Yeah. So, just as an aside, I'm in the beta testing, and I've had a chance to play around with the reports. They're awesome. You're gonna love them. They're really great.
All right, and then when the only MSG for training is also the completion or credential attainment, like a final exam to get the credential, we've been entering an MSG anyway, in addition to the credential attainment. Documentation suggests this isn't necessary, but we figure it doesn't hurt. How will this be different in WAWorks?
Richa, I would say that's
yeah.
Sorry, Ross.
No, you go ahead.
So that's definitely the right idea, because oftentimes every credential is also an MSG. That is always true. So it definitely doesn't hurt. The Pearl will only count 1, but in my opinion, the more MSGs you enter, the better, because you are just able to brag about your work with the customer and the customer's work on their goals. Like Ross said, entering every MSG that you can really is best practice.
And as for the new system, we can't really speak to that at this point, because it's we're not really experts in it, but more guidance on that will be forthcoming.
Scrolling back through the chat, I believe we've answered all of the questions that have been offered, and I think we've had a really great discussion in the room. As we mentioned, this will be posted to WPC. The recording for this session, including this dialogue, will be posted on YouTube. We'll post that link on WPC. We'll include the FAQ in the conversation we've had. Last call for any questions, curiosities, musings, while we have the wisdom of so many folks in this room today. Yes, Susan.
I want to I just heard something and I want to confirm. So if an ITS, an MSG has to be initiated in ITSS first in order for us to measure an MSG, that is test and result touch point. Because the reason why I asked that, because let's say if somebody uh, um, finish an ESL class and they completed, but that is not an OST. So we did not, we wouldn't take a ITSS for that. So, and you just said uh, any credential should be recorded in an MSG. So I just want to make sure I heard it right, or hopefully I'm not confusing you.
So I think for an ESL scenario, the way that you could get a measurable skills gain is if they took a NRS approved exam like the CASAS or the TABE, and you record that. And I don't know if ETO feeds that into the Pearl, but WAWorks should. So in that specific case, if you wanted to capture a measurable skills gain for an ESL client, I think that would be a good way to do it, unless they were enrolled in a Title II program proper for, I think, a high school diploma. That would also be an MSG and credential triggering service. But I think I don't know that an ESL class touch point or service would trigger an MSG, but I know that if they take a CASAS or a TABE as a part of that work with the ESL training provider, you could enter in that documentation and that would trigger a measurable skills gain. But I think, again, if you're not sure if something is triggering an MSG or a credential and you're unable to find out in a timely manner, it's always safe to, I think, to enter the documentation and enter the fact that they earned a measurable skills gain and credential if there is a way to do that without needing to piggyback off of a specific service in the current system.
And
Ross, correct me if I'm wrong. Yeah.
when we say every credential, we mean every credential that was on that list that we talked about before. So it wouldn't necessarily be every single thing, because there's some things that they could earn that would seem to be credentially that wouldn't count for the purposes of this. And so that's one of the reasons why it's important when we're talking specifics to check in with your local program managers and follow the directions that they give, because it can get pretty complicated, let's say.
Yeah, I think what Ross is referring to is like an OSHA certification, according to, and you'll see that in 1016 as well. If it's a really broad certification that isn't tied to a specific career pathway, DOL typically does not accept that as a credential or a measurable skills gain. They have to be something that, especially a credential, has to be something that unlocks the door to a job that you absolutely have to have in order to do the job. And OSHA is just one of those things that doesn't count. I think that it's possible that a food handler's license or a liquor, like a whatever the
Yeah,
yeah.
we don't want to go too far down that road.
If you're not sure, reach out.
Yeah.
Talk to your local supervisors first, see if they know. But if they don't know, you guys can reach out to us and we can give you an answer for sure, one way or the other.
All right, thank you.
So we're getting a couple of curiosities around this what feels like it could be a duplication of data entry. So are we understanding correctly that it only counts once towards credential attainment, keeping the data integrity intact, but that entering it as a test and a result touch point 2 will also count towards MSG? Like, this is the intention that we're meant to count it as both, even though the system only counts it, the Pearl only counts it once.
I'm a little
Are
confused
you talking about the difference
answer.
between
Yeah.
measurable skill gain and credential attainment? Because they report separately on the Pearl.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And the measurable skills gain report is every time it's the most recent one that was entered. So that varies over quarters. If it is different, if there are multiple measurable skill gains, it's always counting the most recent one.
Heidi, did that answer your question?
Sort of. It was going back to Maricha's question about trying to avoid duplicate data entry when somebody completes their credential. So like, I understand that it avoids like duplicating the credential attainment part, but you're saying, yes, it is still worthwhile to also enter that as a test and result in addition to recording that credential attainment outcome so that we also get the MSG included in the MSG rate.
I would say, from I think our perspective, better safe than sorry is a good thing to live by, but that's subject to your local area. I can't overemphasize this. One of the reasons we didn't have a lot of specificity in this is because there's so much different from area to area, and local areas are able to make their own policies that are sometimes more stringent than what's required by the state or the DOL. And so what goes in Seattle, say, might not be the case in Spokane, or vice versa. And so we can give you the broad answer in terms of what the bedrock policy says, but the operationalizing it is something that happens locally. And so that's really, you can get the most comprehensive answer from your program managers.
Also, getting a quick question about, is in ETO as it stands now, is credential attainment logged in test results?
There's
Yeah, I think in the
several.
current, sorry to step in the current system in ETO, I would say that it's better to make sure you have the test and results touch points completed. How it'll work in the new system and if there's less data entry, I'm not sure. I hope so for everybody's sake, but in the current system, in order to make sure that it hits the Pearl for the measurable skill gain, I would recommend making sure that you have it entered in there as well. Just from what I've seen ETO do on the back end, because I have the transparency to see that.
Yeah, I agree. It's in theory, there's a couple places where they pull from, but putting in tests and results is a good way to really nail it down. Any other questions?
That is the end of the questions. We have 5 minutes to close. We just want to invite any final remarks from Ross, maybe Liz in the room today.
It looks like the last
There is
question
now
about
one. Yep, one more question. As I said, no more
So
questions.
Seth
Can we
is
provide a quick example
yeah.
case note to qualify for credential attainment? I think that is back to the local areas. So
Yeah.
we'll make sure that local areas, we're, as we mentioned, I think every local area has staff on this call today. So we'll be sure to connect with our local board partners and communicate that example case notes are something that people are requesting.
Yeah, I think that in general, case notes, having who, what, when, where, why is really important. Making it concise, but I think as detailed as possible to make sure that the reader understands why it counts as a credential. So like an example could be like case manager or on 4/8/26, case manager contacted the counselor at such and such high school and was able to confirm that the client graduated from high school on such and such date, and so who, what, when, where, why, and then I think that could be the documentation that you use to prove that they graduated. But then of course, if you can get any other documentation beyond a case note, that's always best practice as well. I hope that helps. Typically it's who, what, when, where, why, in the case note, especially the date, so that the date can align with whatever other data entry that you're putting for the credential.
Julie.
Yeah, I think one of the things, one of the reasons we also really encourage everyone to connect with your local area is because circumstances for individual participants around the who, what, where, when, why can vary drastically. So if there's any specificity to the question, we strongly recommend that you connect with your local area to ensure that you're able to line up with what the local policies say and what the local program guidance provides.
All right, looks like we're just at about time. We greatly appreciate everybody's presence here. Going to now stop recording and